After California's $20 minimum wage for fast food workers went into effect last April, some economists expected affected restaurants to cut jobs. So what actually happened? They not only added workers, but did so at a faster pace than the fast food restaurants in the nation as a whole. Or at least that was the claim of a research paper by two labor economists at the University of California. If you actually read it, you'll find that the results trumpeted in the press release and echoed by the media aren't in the paper. In fact, it barely addresses the effect of the minimum wage increase on fast food employment in California. It offers no numbers and no models. There's no evidence that fast food jobs increase after the law was implemented.
There are now more fast food workers today than there were prior to the wage hike.
A new study from UC Berkeley found the wage hike did not lead to job cuts.
Only on the second to last page of the 25-page study is employment mentioned. There you'll find a graph that represents the closest thing to an argument in the paper. It shows full-service and fast food restaurant employment in California, represented by the red line, and the U.S., represented by the blue line, from 2023 to 2024. But the red line on the chart clearly shows California fast food employment increasing more slowly than the solid blue line showing national fast food employment, the opposite of the author's claim. If it suggests anything, it's that the minimum wage increase reduced California fast food jobs. But it's still hard to make a precise estimate from the way the chart is presented, so I looked up the numbers, which tell a different story than the author's claim. Even though the paper was published in September, the chart ends in July 2024, when California fast food employment was up 1.85% since March 2024, while national fast food was up 3.22%. In 2021 and 2022, national and California fast food employment grew at nearly identical rates, 7.7% over the 2 years nationally, 7.8% in California. But in 2024, growth slowed dramatically in California and has begun to decline. The slowdown started a couple of months before the law took effect, but that's exactly what you'd expect because it was signed by the governor in September 2023, and management's decisions to close, open, or rebrand their restaurants would have been made in anticipation of the law being implemented. But there's a big problem even with my version of the chart. The data used to draw the red solid line doesn't only represent fast food restaurants impacted by the law, it also includes casual dining restaurants exempted from the law, such as buffets, Paneras, smaller fast food chains, donut and snack shops, grocery store concessions, and most delis. If fast food restaurants were negatively impacted by the law, we would expect some of the exempted establishments to expand to take their market share, thus adding jobs. By combining data from exempted establishments that were likely growing with data from restaurants impacted by the minimum wage increase, the negative effect of the law may be hidden in the data. The authors state that the data is prone to sampling errors and make an inconclusive finding that we do not detect evidence of an adverse employment effect. But the paper's abstract neglected the fine print caution, boldly asserting, "We find that the policy did not reduce employment." The accompanying press release, which is likely all that journalists bothered to read, states that, contrary to fears expressed by restaurant groups, the wage increase did not lead to job cuts. Looking at crude aggregates tells us little, but California possesses the information from employer job reports that would settle the issue. The main objection to high minimum wages is not their effect on overall employment, prices, or profits, it's the fear that they cut off the bottom rungs of the economic ladder for low-skilled workers. Instead of being able to work at low wages while improving job skills and making contacts for advancement, they are forced into the underground cash economy or onto public assistance. Therefore, studies of these laws should focus on the effect on these low-skilled workers, not on economic aggregates. The correct way to study the impact of the $20 minimum wage is to see what happened to fast food workers who were earning less than that amount before April 1st, 2024. How many had their pay raised and hours maintained? How many lost their jobs or lost hours, and what did they do afterward? Were low-skilled workers able to compete for the new job openings after the law's implementation? If minimum wage increases were a drug, governments would have to conduct trials and monitor adverse effects afterward. That's what happened in Seattle when it raised minimum wage in 2014. The city called for proposals to study the impact on actual workers earning below the minimum before the law. The Evans School of Public Policy at the University of Washington was the only volunteer. Their researchers found that the law didn't cause an increase in layoffs among workers who had previously earned below the minimum, but it did reduce their hours by an average of 7%. That was partly offset by a 3% increase in hourly pay for the hours they did work. On net, the law cost these workers an average of $888 per year. That amount is significant in itself, but it's important to consider that it accounts only for the short-term effects. Some layoffs and hour reductions will happen immediately, but others, such as more businesses closing and fewer opening, or automation and other changes reducing employment, can take years. Another point is that it's likely the workers who benefited from higher pay were the ones likely to have risen out of the minimum wage ranks to the middle class, even without a mandated increase, while the workers who lost much more than $888 per year are more likely to be the ones blocked forever from economic advancement. Seattle legislators must have been unhappy with those findings because they cut the funding for the Evans School and reached out to the same group at UC Berkeley that did the California minimum wage study to do its own distorted analysis, which was rushed out a week before the Evans study was made public. Eventually, Seattle raised the minimum wage again. These studies aren't about the search for truth with statistics. Their purpose is to score political points, with a little regard for the low-skilled workers whose lives are directly impacted.